a lot of the ways I'd learned to relate to writing was very much like, you have to sit down and do this, and it's very serious, and you can't have fun, and if you're having fun, it's not real work, and da 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 da, right? Like, and it's like, oh wait, no, like it's actually, it's different. Like there's a different way to do this.
Hello, Julia.
Hello.
I have been a fan of yours for a while now. I love seeing what you post online. We know each other from fermentation school. At least that's how I know you.
Mm-hmm.
Fermentation school is this awesome women-run education hub where fermentationists from around the world come together and teach their passion and their love. And you have a new Oracle deck coming out that I just think is honestly, I'm so inspired by it. So tell us a little bit about you, your fermentation journey, how it's all woven together with your creative projects. I'm super excited to have this conversation with you.
Awesome. Well, thank you for having me. And so, yeah, I'll start with where my fermentation journey started, which was, gosh, over 20 years ago now. And so my origin story is kind of similar to Sandor Katz's, where it's like you had a garden that had all this stuff in it, and you're like, okay, well, I've got like 10 cabbages and I live alone. Like, I don't really know what to do here. And so, yeah, one of my friends who had grown up on a farm in Iowa was like, she's like, well, you could just make sauerkraut. And I was like, oh, right. I don't know how to do that. And so she showed me, and then here we are. So I started with sauerkraut and yogurt, and then kind of expanded out, on and on into other things. I was terrified of fermenting with koji for like 10 years for some reason, even though koji is like not actually scary, but I think a lot of people have that reaction to it. And I also did, but now I know better. Now I love it.
So sauerkraut is your gateway ferment, if you will.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. And then, so talk a little bit about koji for people who don't know what it is. It's from Japan.
Yeah, so koji is Aspergillus oryzae is the scientific name, and it's a fungus that's used to make soy sauce, sake, miso, like all of these different foods that we associate with Japanese cuisine. And there's similar ferments in other cultures too. And so there's kind of this rich history of these long, slow fermentation processes that are fungal based. And koji is actually very magical, wonderful stuff. When you make a batch, Hannah, as I'm sure you very much know, like you open up like as it's like fermenting, and you open it, and it has this like really specific sweet smell that's like really, really wonderful. And it you can make amazakes, kind of a good way to get that smell and that taste. And it's a very nourishing like wintertime drink.
Ooh.
Yeah, so it's good stuff.
And that's like a thick, kind of like a thick rice drink, right?
Yeah, like almost like a porridge, but like not like a bowl of porridge, like a drinkable porridge.
A drinkable porridge that isn't made from grain.
Indeed. Well, that's made from rice, but yeah, isn't like oatmeal or something.
That's what I was referring to. You are correct. Rice is a grain. Grains of rice, in fact.
I mean, it's great. Grains are confusing. Like, I don't know.
Are they grass? Are they a legume? What are they?
Nobody knows.
So your fermentation road sounds like it's taken you on a lot of different places, but then you weave it together with magic, because fermentation is magic. And I know you have an Oracle deck coming out. So tell us a little bit about how that came into being. And I also know you support other creatives, whether they're in fermentation or not. So you like to, like all humans, blend your diverse gifts together to create unique offerings.
Yeah, so it's been this year has been very cool for seeing how all of that has sort of come together. Kind of to start with my creative work and then working back to the Oracle deck. So last year I founded a writing coaching and creative coaching company, and I've been doing writing coaching for fellow writers since like 2019, but I wanted to start guiding writers in a different way that wasn't just like, here's how to set goals and have accountability. So like, that's good. Like, let's have that. But The thing that's really missing in a lot of our conversations about creativity is not just the product, but also the process. And so what I'm trying to get people back into is like recognizing that weaving pleasure and appreciation into the process is non-optional. Like we have to do that so that we actually enjoy the work and we produce better work and it comes more easily and we're like actually making the things we want to put into the world and all of this stuff.
Just
So
to comment on that,
yeah.
that I think is right. It's the journey.
Mm-hmm.
Use a sort of cliche, which I love cliches because they're so true. So even though they're cliches, like, oh, but they have so much wisdom because they're actually accurate.
Yeah.
But that is something, fermentation for me, one of the things it has taught me and that I try to express to people is that it is a process. I think our
Mm-hmm.
commercialized world is one of like instant gratification, instant success, instant results, which we all end up disappointed because it's not true.
Yeah.
And then there's this constant reliving of this, like, oh, this one will work. No, it doesn't. This one will work. No, it doesn't.
No, it doesn't. Yeah.
And so I love you reminding people, remembering them, bringing them back to that, like the process is just as fun as the end result.
Mm-hmm.
Because you don't get to the end result without going through the process.
It's true. And like I have long had this perspective of like you're going to be doing all this stuff anyways, so like why not have fun? And like I had to unlearn so much having been in academia, right? I have a doctorate in library science and like but whatever academic stuff you've done, like you get kind of this like toxic relationship to writing and work. And I had to unweave a lot of that for myself because a lot of the ways I'd learned to relate to writing was very much like you have to sit down and do this and it's very serious and you can't have fun and if you're having fun it's not real work and da 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 da, da right, like and it's like oh wait no, like it's actually it's different, like there's a different way to do this, which is kind of how we started with this. And then that has evolved into, so I've been doing my own sort of like pleasure and sustainability based writing coaching for about a year. And I also do intuitive guidance for writers and other creatives kind of wanting that sort of support on their journey. And I also recently, as in the recent future, I will be opening the Culinary Curiosity School, which is like basically applying that like play and curiosity kind of stuff to our culinary lives as well as to our lives as creatives. So kind of, merging those two worlds in some cool ways.
Let's talk about intuitive, because I'm someone I've done tarot cards since I was 15. I regret not keeping my first deck because it was not a traditional deck at all. I bought it at Barnes and Noble. I know, it's all these interesting like gods from different cultures, and like I've never found it ever again.
Oh man.
I regret having let it go. Those phases of life, things ebb and flow. That said, I love tarot. I have a very consistent practice. I've learned about human design. It's completely transformed how I manage my energy, and it's been a wonderful tool.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, I think we all have intuitive gifts. The question is to what degree we're actually using them. How are we leveraging them? So how did your intuitive side manifest for you?
I mean, that's an interesting question because I think for me, it's interesting. I always knew it was there, and I think that, that's true for a lot of people who develop that gift over the course of our lives, right? For me, it was interesting because I was raised in a, shall we say, intense evangelical church that is often listed on like, cult watch lists and things. So
one of those.
One of those. So it was a very chill time.
Not a lot of rules. Very free.
Yeah, very free. Very, very many opportunities to, explore my gifts and my true self. So it was interesting because I always knew this gift was there, and my mom and my grandma, and I think to a lesser extent my dad knows more about it now, but when I was a kid, I don't think he did. My mom and my grandma both knew about it, and kind of helped me develop that gift, but like under the radar of that church. So that was kind of
Mm.
interesting. And so I always felt like there was support for my intuitive work, even though I was in a very, I mean, honestly, dangerous space for like a, witchy queer person. Like it was not a safe environment for me to be in, the
One
church.
where they might still burn you at the stake.
They very well might. They did plenty of other bad stuff. So like, who knows what they would do.
Right.
But then as an adult, I remember very clearly I had this moment where I had this intuitive insight about like a particular really bad thing that was about to happen. And like on a global scale, and in this case it was a bombing of a train in Spain. This was like 20 years ago or something. And like I'm not sure why that particular event, like, why kind of like my intuition latched onto that. But I I specifically had I had this like strong like visual, like I was there, and I was just like, okay, listen, universe, like I don't want this gift, like this is too much. And
Mm.
I like the universe's response was like, I mean, okay, buddy, but like we'll be back. Like you'll get a break for a while, but like we'll be back.
Well, you're like, what do I do with this? Am I going
Right,
and saving people? Am I like, what am I
right.
supposed to do here?
Yeah, and so it like I didn't really have, any of the kind of my intuitive flashes of things for years. And then it was like, okay, like they're back now. But when they came back, I had more of the tools to deal with it better, like to understand that, like, okay, maybe this event is not something I can personally stop. But it is something that tells me that sort of in the global zeitgeist, here's ways I need to be showing up and like protecting my energy, supporting other people's energy, doing whatever other work in the world. And so now when I get those, I mean, it's still very disturbing, right? Like that is not an enjoyable thing to experience, but I know how to navigate it. And I've since been able to expand my practice um, over the course of like the last 15 years or so to include like the intuitive guidance I do now, where I kind of tap into a person's energy and do that sort of like um, work that's guided around, okay, where does this person want to go? Where do they have blocks? Things like that.
Well, and that's so helpful because it's difficult to see your own blocks, even if you have this gift. Even if you
Mm-hmm.
have the gift of insight and wisdom, when you're living in your own existence, it's hard to see for yourself. You might be able to see for other people and have real clarity and confidence in expressing that, but for your own self, there can be like doubts and is this the case? And so adding that extra layer, especially for creatives, I bet really is so supportive because not only are you able to help them see their own future, but they're able to, use that as a mirror for themselves
Mm-hmm.
to kind of see where can I go next from here.
Absolutely. Yeah, and it's very rewarding work too. Like it's a way to support creatives that I think, I mean, I don't want to say I'm like the only person in the world that's doing this, but I mean, I have not encountered it otherwise, and so if it's not unique, it's at least uncommon.
And I
As
think that
uh,
we're going to see more of this type of offering emerge because I truly think, I don't know, to get, maybe you're into this, maybe you're not, but like the age of Aquarius, I really think that what
mhm,
we're stepping into is an age less of like the guru leading me and needing to look
mhm,
outside myself for answers, but more as embodied individuals who trust that intuition, who trust our that spiritual guidance. And then we're looking for that from other people and we're seeing each other less as, again, in this more hierarchical way and more as this, okay, I'm an embodied being, you're an embodied being, we each have gifts, how can we
mhm.
learn and grow from each other? That's my personal thought process about where we're heading.
Yeah. No, I feel that very much. I think that's part of why when I got the intuitive nudge to start these businesses, I think that's part of why that timing was. Like there's I was just talking with Julia Albane, who's a energy healer. Her and I are doing a 4-week program, like kind of like mid October to mid November, that's called Creative Revolution, that's like all about kind of the combination of this like energy work along with like practically okay like energy work, and then how do we do the actual work of like creating whatever it is we're creating. And that's like, her and I were talking about it, and we were like, well, like, I don't know, maybe we should niche it down or something, but we're both like, I think that the age of niching down is done. Like, I think we're all kind of spreading out and looking for new ways to engage with the world. And I think, kind of to bring it back to fermentation, I think that's part of why fermentation is capturing so many people's minds right now, is because it is such a good teacher, and it asks us to really expand our practice and our understanding in ways that we wouldn't otherwise.
Yeah, I mean, if we want to go down the fermentation rabbit hole, I call us bacteriosapiens. I think that human
Mm-hmm.
beings and bacteria have this integral, and fungi and all the things, all the
All the
microbes.
things.
The
All the
microbes are magic, and so are we.
things.
But that relationship that we have with them, and this sort of how we've lost a lot of our bacteriological heritage. The
Mm-hmm.
reality is, though, we have these, millions, billions of years potentially of DNA wisdom in every single cell of our body. And using microbes, whether that's through fermentation, whether it's making it, consuming it, just being aware of it, then translates into this creative process. How bacteria are capable of, a cell will rupture, they'll come in and grab some DNA from that and produce it again. For me, this is like meme culture, right?
Yeah.
You see, someone will take one image, but they'll put different sayings on top of it. That to me feels like bacteria in like bacteriosapiens are doing their bacteria thing, which is, iterating on what exists. And so I
Mm-hmm.
love this dovetailing of the fermentation, of the creativity, of the intuition, because that's another one of my theories. Feel free to share your own. Is that part of bacteria communicate through quorum sensing.
Mm-hmm.
So when we have gut feelings or gut instincts, especially about people or energies, are our bacteria communicating information to us? And because we just haven't developed the language, it feels like that is what intuition is potentially, or at least a part of
Mm-hmm.
it.
Yeah, well, I think, if you do somatic work and you learn to listen to your nervous system, I mean, our microbes in our bodies, I mean, our microbiomes talk with our nervous system a lot. They interface, constantly. And I mean, I think it's important to remember too that, I mean, kind of to build on your theory, something I think about a lot is like these are very ancient beings. Like each
Mhm.
individual being has a very short lifespan, and so they have so many generations, but they themselves are ancient. I mean, and so there's this embodied wisdom we have the potential to tap into, that I think we're finally starting to sort of scratch the surface of. And yeah, I mean, even, like talking about postbiotics and all of the new
Mhm.
things that we're learning. I mean, and the ways that our vagus nerve intersects with our gut microbiome, and like on and on. I mean, it's the symbiosis. I mean, as you've talked about, like is so important and so central to who we are.
And not just in our own physical body, but in the world, with
Mhm.
the ecology, with the biome of the planet.
Mhm.
And again, these witchy things, or these shamanistic things, or these herbal medicine things that all human beings have engaged with throughout time. Now, we live in a culture where we didn't have a culture. And so we
Yeah.
became this sort of petri dish for modernity to come in, and we weren't rooted, which I know is one of
Mhm.
your rooted kitchen or roots kitchen.
Yeah.
We weren't rooted in that ancient culture. And so we really kind of have fallen into this like, what is culture, what is valuable, what is enduring and lasting. And this is where I think ultra processed foods have flourished, because we didn't have a culture of, well, no, here's what we eat and here's how we make it and here's how we
Mhm.
ferment it, passed on to us. Yes, some of that was brought over, but so much of the processed foods industry really flourished in this country.
Yeah. Yeah, well, and I think that, this country it's so interesting. I think our individualistic tendencies play into that as well. Like when I'm over in Ireland, when I'm living over there, I mean, people still, have individual lives and preferences and things, but there's a little more cultural, like, collective awareness in a
Mm.
way that the US is kind of on the extreme end of individualism,
Yeah.
and most cultures are kind of, in the middle, and then there's, like, maybe a few that are super collectivist, but, like, yeah, like, we don't have a concept of automatically thinking in terms of community. We
Right.
we default to the self, which, I mean, it's not a bad thing to think of ourselves. Like, I think especially, for basically anybody who's not a cishet white male, like, most of history has not allowed for much space for thinking about self, right? And so I think there's some empowering things behind doing that, but we can also think about self and not the community, and that's a problem. So.
Well, and I think the spectrum and the exploration on both edges
Mhm.
is important and valuable because it allows us to then figure out, okay, so what are the shared values that we then can come back to? What really is important about community and how we create it and how we support it.
Mhm.
While at the same time, and this is, I think, what I mean, going back to the age of Aquarius versus Pisces, is that we're able to then be ourselves and in a collective in a way that doesn't have
Mhm.
to sacrifice all of our autonomy or all of our individuality in order for the collective to thrive and
Mhm.
survive. And in fact, our individuality is probably what's going to elevate it, make it more creative, and make it more sustainable over time.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's an exciting time. I know a lot of people are like, "This is a terrifying time to be alive," and I'm like, "No, it's exciting because we're shaping, I mean, the entire trajectory of history through our actions. I mean, even through something as, as simple as having a fermentation practice. Like, it's not like each of us need to be out there on the world stage. Each of us is shaping history with, with whatever decisions we're making."
Although with this, we're all on the world stage all the
That's true.
time
That's
if we
true.
desire,
Very true.
which is the irony of it, right? For better and for worse in so many different ways. But to be honest, I think every point in history has actually been exciting and interesting
Yeah.
because this is also why I say, again, being a fermentationist, being a Scorpio, I'm like, death, it's just a normal part of what we do. And in fact, the decay is where new nutrients are created and new vitamins are synthesized and other
Mhm.
opportunities for growth are created. And I think that's part of why we have a lifespan. There's been so
Yeah.
much change just every 100 years that a person can have a hard time adapting and adjusting to all that change. And so it
Yeah.
makes sense why we have a lifespan that allows us to let go so that the
Mhm.
new can come and emerge and evolve. And again, like those bacteria, we are ancient beings. It's just
Yeah.
how we're recombining ourselves continues to change and evolve. So, okay, these are fun, esoteric, nerdy conversations, but let's talk a little bit more. Your curiosity um, club, no curiosity
Cool. Oh,
school.
yes.
Yes.
So, Culinary Curiosity School is opening on November 11th, and that's when we're opening up all the pre-orders and all the stuff, and then the actual classes themselves, people will start to access those a couple weeks after. And so when we open, my goal is to just, like, to get people really, like, to give people these classes in a very accessible way, and a lot of what so there's a few ways I'm doing that. One of them is I'm having tiered pricing, and another one is I'm having a variety of different kinds of classes, and they're self-paced, so people who are working a bunch or in different time zones than me or whatever, can still access them. And so some of the initial ones in the catalog are the Fermentative Creation Lab, which I'm excited about, which is taps into a lot of what we've been talking about, which is part journaling and part meditations and part, like, more practical, nuts and boltsy stuff about building a fermentation practice that connects to the ways in which you want to change the world, and articulating that and saying specifically what that looks like, and, like, what does that look like for my business? What does that look like for me? Whatever, however that looks, or for your writing practice if you're a writer. There's also a food writing playground, which is a, like, playful co-writing space for food writing. There's what else do we have? Finding Your Food Story, which is going to be like a more intensive deep divey course that's like part meditations and part that sort of stuff, journaling, reflection, things like that, and then part like how to do this kind of research and write about food and like develop what your food story is.
Like the foods you like to eat, or the foods you're attracted to, or your relationship with food? Is it all of that?
All of that, and like, I mean, and it might expand farther for, for some people. So there's kind of a metaphysical aspect to it for some, for some people too. And so it covers that, or there's like historical aspects or familial aspects, or geographic ones. And so it touches on a bunch of those different things. And then, yeah, as the school is around, I'm gonna, add more and more classes and make it even
So this
better.
is like a show up and learn a recipe. And
Yeah, if people want to show up and learn a recipe, the best place to do that is my newsletter. Because that's where I'm like, okay, here's like recipes, specific steps, learn about how I made this recipe, da 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 da. And then the classes are more. I do have a few classes that are kind of like basic fermentation, like, lacto fermentation 101, like learn to make kimchi or sauerkraut or whatever. And so if you want a video-based sort of program, that's a good way to do it. Most of the classes are geared a little more towards this intersection of creation and reflection, in a way that we don't see a lot of in culinary classes. They're normally just very skills based. So I'm interested to see how people respond to it.
Well, you've been doing this whole article series on cookbooks. And so what this sounds to me, as you described, older cookbooks assumed you had skills and ability to do things. And it was only later, as we kind of became disconnected from that information or those people to teach us, that it became very process steps oriented. And so it's almost like you're taking us back into this other space where we get to create, where we get to reconnect with the skills and really hone those instead of only focusing on process and steps.
Yes, absolutely. And I mean, I think when you have part of my work is about developing a personal relationship to whatever you're doing, whatever you're cooking. And so that's part of why the tagline for Root is historic food for the modern world, because if we're not connected to it, I started to develop this when I was a rare books curator, like years and years and years ago. And I was like, okay, we have all these incredible old books that are, hundreds and hundreds of years old, but if they're just sitting there and nobody's looking at them, I mean, like, I'm not saying take them out and like have everybody put their like, sticky food covered hands all over them or something, but like at least make them accessible in some way, right? And so culinary knowledge, I have a very similar perspective about. Is like, if I'm like, oh, like look at this cool thing and it's so interesting, but people are like, wow, that's really cool, I didn't know that, like, people used to make ketchup with mushrooms, how interesting. But like, if if all you're getting out of it, it's like, okay, I mean, like, that's a cool fact, like now the person has a cool fact. But if they're not connecting to it, then like, they're not going to carry that forward.
Oh my gosh, we did so much research for the big book of kombucha. And yes, mushroom ketchup. We did a banana ketchup recipe that they did in the Philippines out of necessity. But even the like making mustard balls, and then you would reactivate them when you arrived because you couldn't carry around jars of mustard. So just even thinking about the lives of how people existed that led to them using food in this way versus the ultra convenience of our modern world, where we literally just go buy what we need and don't ever think about, well, what are the ingredients, or what is cream of tartar, or what is,
Right.
you get baking soda or powder. Like, what are these powders and boxes? Where do they come from? Right?
So many powders
that do magical things. And but they also were byproducts, right? Like cream of tartar is a byproduct of grapes and fermentation. And so I think it's fascinating. I'm personally fascinated by this stuff as well. So leading back to the Fermentation Oracle, which I believe we have a copy we can give away. Oh my, it's huge. It's beautiful. Look at that.
Big.
It's nice.
Yeah, and so it has, I'm not sure how well I can show this here, but it has a book and then the cards. Oh, the cards are on this side. But really beautifully done.
I've already purchased a few copies to give as
Amazing.
gifts and for myself.
Did you sign up for the pre-order?
I did. I need to sign up for my friend to get the pre-order as well.
Okay, good. You should definitely,
because you're doing a wheel of the year, so
which I also have here. If you wanna see it.
Oh, it's so pretty.
Isn't it nice?
It is.
So it's, as you can see, it goes around in a wheel, and it's like each season has its different theme, and then it's nicely illustrated. So winter is rest, for example. Yeah. I love it. Yes, I'm going to pull a card for us.
Ooh, I love that.
All right. We have imagination.
Ooh, yeah, there we go. Oh, it's like a jug overflowing.
Yeah, isn't that the illustrations are so lovely? Like,
the lid is popping off.
I know, it's so evocative. And so I'll pull out our little book here so I can read you the actual words I wrote rather than just saying it off the top of my head.
I like it.
But
even now with my tarot cards, I will go back and read the words because I like to hear how it's been interpreted by that person or whatnot.
Absolutely. Yeah, so this is a really fun one. I'm glad I pulled this one because the food that it relates to, the food being shown here, is a mead that I made that is made to mimic the flavor of what I imagine Atlantis, the lost island of Atlantis, to taste like.
Wow.
And so imagination, the card, so we've got the recipe and then the interpretation here. And the interpretation is, born of a legend and some creativity, this mead represents the power of our imaginations to manifest change. What dreams are you trying to manifest right now? What future are you speaking into being? Do your words and actions, including the words you say about yourself, align with the world you imagine?
I love that. That feels like the perfect card for me right now. I'm definitely going through an evolution, and then it has the recipe for how to make the mead. Is that right?
It does. Yeah. So it's got. I mean, not that I'm going to like read you the whole recipe because that doesn't make for good listening, but like, but it's got. I mean, honey, obviously, because it's mead. But then I have different herbs, and then I also have kelp in it to make it kind of, since it was an island nation, to kind of emulate some of that like salinity and ocean flavor.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Oh wow. How did that mead turn out for you? What did it have? Some flavors reminiscent of the sea?
It did. It was, I actually made this years ago for listeners who might be familiar with Miss Wondersmith, who does all kinds of, I mean, she does everything from like really whimsical pottery to events to like all the, and like costumes. Like she's like super magical, but she like, her and I did a collaboration, oh gosh, in like 2018 or 2019, I think. I just like emailed her out of the blue and I was like, we should collaborate. And she was like, yeah. And so we did a collaborative kind of recipe co-post thing on the island of Atlantis. And so she made a one of the panis quadratus, the Pompeian like 4-quarter bread, but she made it with, I can't remember, I think she used spirulina in it, but it's like this really beautiful blue-green color. And then this mead is what I made. So it was kind of born out of this like collective imagination and then was brought to life in the deck through, my further imaginings. So pretty cool.
I love it because it's like food as art exhibit, but then you get to eat it too.
Then you get to eat it. Yeah, that meat was really good. It was really good.
Like, I need to go make a batch right now.
We'll make a batch right now.
It's the perfect time. Set it up now. It'll be ready for fall, for evening sipping.
That's true. Yeah, and this one, I mean, is so light. Like, I've even just let it go for like a week or two and just had it as like a very fresh drinking mead. Yeah, it's really good.
Well, Julia, all of this sounds so amazing. How can people connect with you? Because obviously they're going to want to learn more.
Well, I'll send you like all of the links to things, but
Mhm.
for people who want to connect with me on social, I have like 10 billion handles. And so Root, which is my food history, and my newsletter and all of that good stuff, that's at Root Kitchens. The Culinary Curiosity School is culinary.curiosity.school. The writing coaching, intuitive guidance, all that good stuff, creative coaching, that is Your Roots and Branches. And then my personal one, which is a just weird catch-all, is at Bookish Julia. And I have websites for each of those. I'll send the links for and all of that good stuff too. And the deck is called the Fermentation Oracle. And if people order it before it releases on October 15th, they can get their own very nice little wheel if they fill out a form online. I highly recommend it.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your time, your creative spirit, and that lovely card reading for us. We've so enjoyed having you here, and thank you. We'll see you next time.
Thank you so much.